Hey there, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for class today. If you would, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, leave us a comment. It does a whole bunch to help us grow, and we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming. We hope you enjoy the class today. Well, hello, I am Roy Jean.
I'm Marc.
And this is Clazz in the Woods, our second episode, and today we are joined by my student, Johnson. Hello there, Johnson.
Hello, Roy Jean. Hello, Marc.
How are you doing this week?
Pretty good and very excited about today's topic.
Yeah, okay. So speaking of, today we're talking about what is that guy's YouTube channel name? Woodz, that's his name, Woodz. I thought, oh no.
Would have been funny.
That's like the one thing when you're like, what are we talking about today? Woodz, where he's talking about how there are many people who say that English is just badly spoken French. Or badly pronounced French, I suppose. Okay, so we were going to start with what thoughts did you have about that video? What questions or what things didn't make any sense?
After I watched this video, I think that we have to start from how English come from.
Where does it come from?
Yeah, so that we'll know why is English just bad pronounced French.
Yes, okay, that's a fair question. Like, where does English come from? So the short answer is English comes from... But you know, yesterday when we were watching the video and we were talking, and it was one of the things that I mentioned, and it's part of the problem when you're talking about the beginning of something. Where does something come from originally? There's always a bit of, like, arbitrariness to where you assign the beginning of something. That being said, most people would say that English started in Denmark. There's a peninsula that it's called Jutland, and that's where the Angles and the Saxons and the Utes, I believe, because in German the J is pronounced like a Y, so I believe they're Utes. But in any case, that's where those people came from. They moved from Denmark into England, what we now call England. That name England comes from Angle, the Angles. Anyway, they moved in there after the Romans left, and they brought their language with them. Okay, so that's, most people would say that's where the oldest form of what we would say is distinct English comes from. Before then, it would have been like what we call Proto-Germanic. Like, English is a Germanic language. It comes from a very early language called Proto-Germanic, which is where we also get Dutch and German and Swedish and Norwegian and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But interestingly enough, that has nothing to do with French. So how is English badly pronounced French? So what, I don't know, and what did you take away from what he was describing, Johnson?
I think that after I watched this video, I also find some information that why English is badly spoken in French, because that Norman invaded French in 1066. So that
is right.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you watched Game of Thrones at all, Johnson?
No. But you recommend me to watch that videos.
Yeah. Well, it depends on if you like medieval fantasy, TV shows. But in any case, like, Game of Thrones is based on a period of English history called the Heptarchy, which means in English 7 kingdoms. I mean, that's why in Game of Thrones there are 7 kingdoms on Westeros. It's partially based on that period of English history before that guy invaded in 1066. Yes. When he came with him, you're right, he spoke Norman French, which is interesting. We'll talk about that later because that's one of the things that they mentioned.
Yeah.
That in English, sometimes we have the same exact French word repeated, but it's because we took that word from different dialects of French.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is quite interesting. I don't know, what thoughts did you have on this? Mister.
I also, yeah, I saw that from a video.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it makes sense because sometimes you have like two word, in teaching, in our teaching, sometimes we will explain like a word and then our students will say like, well, what about this word? I thought this also means the same thing. And we'll say, yeah, it's it's a similar word, but I actually never, I didn't know that it like became, well, it came from the two dialects of the same language. So yeah, that was interesting. I also learned that from the video.
And I think that we should all read the Beowulf. Do you know the Beowulf?
I did in college, but I don't
It is from
remember.
Old English.
Yeah. That is interesting that you've read Beowulf, but I haven't. I never read
Well,
Beowulf.
I read there was the original text, but we didn't read the original text. We read the translated version.
Oh.
But
Well, even I couldn't read the original.
yeah. Yeah, like we didn't try to see like this
so
letter
what is
means
the
this.
Beowulf
Like,
talking about?
Beowulf is
that a true story?
I don't believe so. That's an Anglo-Saxon myth,
yeah,
which
okay.
because I'm actually not familiar with the story. You know more about it than I do.
oh gosh, I actually don't.
Beowulf is
a long time.
He's like Hercules, right?
It's a myth.
Yeah, it's a myth.
It's a myth. It's like,
Is he fully human or is he half god, half human?
I would say he's full human, but
Has God have human?
is he?
I don't actually know. I just know that it's it's similar to a Hercules story. Like he's a mythical hero who like shows up to save the day at the last minute or something like that. Yeah. But now that is from, I believe Beowulf is from before the Norman conquest. So now that's very Old English, which does not sound anything like what we said. Like, I think, did you and I from the last class, I gave you the example. Oh, okay. Well, we're referencing an episode that no one will ever see. It's one of the lost episodes.
One of the many lost episodes.
But do you remember I gave the example of the Lord's Prayer, right? Like in modern English, and I use the Lord's Prayer not for any particular reason, it's just because we don't have a lot of written text from back then. But one thing that we do have is the Anglo-Saxon Bible, like the version of the Bible that was written and translated into Anglo-Saxon. And the Lord's Prayer, if you say it in modern English, or at least the way that people will say it stylistically, they might say, "Our Father who is in heaven, holy is your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Okay, now that's the modern English. Now, if I were to say that in Old Anglo-Saxon, it would sound something like, "Fader ure futhe art in hilfanum sithen nama Yahauga tobekumeth in riche on irathan swaswa on hilfanum." That's the same thing, but that's in Old English, which you can hear the inflection, like the endings added to words to change the case and stuff, which we don't really do that in modern English anymore. Some of the vocabulary is very different. There's just like some words we haven't retained.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. But since we're talking about it's the root of English as one of the Germanic,
part of the Germanic language family.
Part of the Germanic, yeah. In the video, they also mentioned this guy also mentioned that some words, the words that we use very commonly in like everyday life nowadays, are Germanic words.
Right.
Like
the core English vocabulary is the same now as it has been for hundreds of years. It's evolved over time. The pronunciation has changed and the grammar has evolved, but the core vocabulary that you use for most everyday conversation is English in origin.
Yeah, like I think he mentioned something like mother,
right?
Mother, father,
sister.
Oh
well, mother, father, daughter, son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mother, father, daughter, son.
Yeah. which
these are Germanic.
Those are Germanic, right?
But then like other words such as
uncle, aunt, niece, nephew.
These are French.
Those are French.
These are French. Yeah.
And I think
which are English.
Which are
no English.
Right. And I think what he doesn't really say this in the video, but it's a thing to remember. Like at the time when English was forming, like when English was developing as a language, Latin was already a very well-established, many like 1,000-year-old language by that point, with a very extensive vocabulary, a very extensive written, like literary tradition.
Yeah.
It was just a more developed language. The Romans were a more sophisticated civilization than the early Angles and Saxons and Utes were. These were people who were very simple farmers and fishermen. Yeah. They lived in very simple communities. They didn't have very wide, extended family networks and like systems of hierarchy and all that sort of thing. One of my favorite things that he only mentions it a little bit in the video, but it's where he's talking about the disappearing H's. Do you remember that part from the video, Johnson?
Yes.
Yeah. Now that's a thing that we get from French. The French have a tendency to swallow the H or just not make it at all. But he mentions this, that the words Lord and Lady. Do you know the words Lord and Lady? Like what's a Lord and what's a Lady?
Queen.
Could be, yeah, or just like a noble man or a noble woman. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the original words for Lord and Lady are Lord is hlafwerd. Hlaf is where we get the modern English word loaf, as in a loaf of bread. And then werd means guard. So literally the man who guards the bread. And it comes from a time in English history when, as a farmer, you would take either all of your crops or a share of your crops to the local person whose job it was to guard that, to protect it, and they would keep it for you in case you needed it. And that's where that term comes from. Lady is even more interesting. Lady comes from hlafdige, which means bread kneader. The one who kneads the bread.
Oh, okay.
Like gets it ready for baking. Which to me, it's just a small thing, but like to me that's, I don't know. Something about that's really funny. Like the person doing most of the work there is the person who's kneading the bread. Whereas the Lord's job is just to watch it.
Watch the bread.
Watch the bread.
Watch the bread.
Yes. The lady needs it. She does the work. But the man just stands to the side and makes sure that everything is
fine.
That looks good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Question: when they use the word watch, do they just mean it literally, or would somebody actually come?
It's the word. So hlafwerd. Now that word is the modern English word ward, like warden.
Yeah, like guard the bread.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the question. Like, were there people actually coming to like steal the bread?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
I guess it. Yeah.
I mean, back then, grain. I mean, depending on how sophisticated the society was, grain could be food, but it could also be currency. It could also be money that you use to pay taxes to your local. I mean. Sure, I framed, taking the bread to the local lord as a protection, like taking it there for protection.
Right.
But, I mean, in English, we also have an expression called protection money, which is something that you pay to someone so that they won't beat you up. Like, pay me so that you will be safe from me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, it could have been both, and it often probably was both. I mean, they were probably taking their grain to the local lord, both so that they would have some in store, but also so that that lord would either come to their aid in a time of need, or if the lord was corrupt, so that the lord would leave them alone and not harass them.
Yeah. This dropping of H, not exactly the H I'm going to talk about, but I want to talk about the word estate.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Johnson, did you see that part also?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. So in English, we had the word state or estate. And then in French is
État.
État. E-T-A-T-E.
And then stage, he uses another one, stage. In English, we say that. In French, it's étage.
Étage.
And
So
he
it's-
also says stranger,
Yeah.
like someone you don't know. In French is étranger, I think is what he said. Yeah.
That sounds about, yeah.
Yeah.
So like the word went into, that was Old French.
That's
Was it?
Old French.
It was Old
Yes.
French,
Uh-huh.
and it was borrowed into English, and then it was borrowed back
Yeah.
to modern French. Is that what it's called? Or
Oh,
like,
yeah. He's talking about that.
Yeah.
Side note, you know that the really famous bookstore in Taiwan?
I've always had trouble pronouncing that word because I'm not athlete.
Well, I don't actually know what the original French pronunciation is, but
Athlete.
that's Old French elite, E-L-I-T-E.
Yeah.
It's Old French, and it's from the Old French before they dropped the S.
Actually, I didn't know.
So what does the elite mean?
Like high class, difficult to get, desirable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Elite. Oh. Yeah, every time I try to pronounce it, I'm just like, athlete? I don't know.
It would probably be like elite. I don't know if in old. I mean, the thing is, no letter starts out silent.
Right.
It becomes silent over time. So, if there's an S there, that would suggest to me that at one time they used to say the S.
Oh, okay.
So it could be like, but I have no idea.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, and like Old French is, well, the thing is, I think modern French people can still read Old French, I think. It's kind of like, I don't think that the differences between Old French and modern French are extensive enough that it makes it impossible for someone to read it. Like, I can read Old English, but I usually need a translated text so that I can compare and see how the word is different. And for one thing, the letters in Old English didn't always make the same sounds that they do in
Right.
modern English.
Yeah.
And there are letters in Old English that we don't use anymore. Like, this is... Uh-huh.
I remember it's like a I, but it has an O in the middle. Do you remember that?
Oh,
the
yes,
letter?
yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even know how to pronounce it.
What's the word for something not thick?
Not thick.
Opposite of
The opposite
thick?
of thick.
Thing.
Thin. Okay. Not now. Don't do it now. Let's do it then. Okay, so you have the word thin, then. They're very close to each other.
But then there used to be different
Those
letters.
sounds are we write the sound the same, TH. But there's actually two sounds. There's two TH sounds. There's thorn. That's the letter you were describing.
Yeah.
The letter looks like a circle with a line through
The
it.
line, yeah.
And that's a rune. That's not a letter. That comes from Norse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But now that refers to the sharp TH. Think of it like this. What is the difference between an S and a Z?
What's the difference of S and Z?
Yeah. How is the sound different?
S and Z. So we stop Z.
You use your vocal cords. Okay.
Yes.
So for an S is aspirated. It's just air out of your mouth. Z, you use your vocal cords. Okay, so the TH sound in thin, so not thick but thin, that's the aspirated. That's thorn. Then in not now but then, that TH sound is F, which looks like a 6 backwards with a line through it.
Yes.
Now, we used to use those letters, but they've been gone for a very long time. The only place that you ever see them is in IPA. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard a saying that goes, like in the past when people would transcribe letters, because they couldn't print things out, like if they want to make copies, and then the way they would write V would actually be kind of similar to W, to U, And then
in the cursive form.
Yeah. So in the past, like maybe they would write W in terms of like 2 V's, but then they write it into like 2 U, so like double U.
Double.
Oh well, that makes sense. Yeah, because in Latin, like Latin letters, they always, well, not always, but most, like the V was always written like this. It was never written like that.
Yeah.
Which we do that in English cursive writing. I remember learning that in school. Oh, gosh.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that is. I'm not sure, like in terms of the timeline. I don't know if where should we put that event on?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
And it also maybe like more than one event.
Possibly.
Like yeah.
Hey guys, we have to stop here because this episode is running a bit too long.
But if you'll come back next Sunday, we'll have part 2, maybe even part 3, depending on how long the show turns out to be. Before you go, please do us a favor. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. It does help us to grow our channel. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.